Deep Threat Sports Network. We're back at it again. We're reviewing week 5. What a weekend it was. I mean, upsets, big wins, people solidifying their positions for Heisman, potentially Coach of the Year. Crazy, crazy weekend. There was a lot of good games starting from Friday. But before we get into the gist of things, we just want to, kind of mention prayers to all the families in Western North Carolina, as well as Eastern Tennessee, as well as up straight through the Gulf, everyone in Florida, everyone that got affected by Hurricane Helene. It caused a lot of damage, so we're just praying for you guys, hoping everything gets better. It touches my heart because I'm a North Carolina native. But on to more exciting things, a little bit happier news. We're going to talk about Dog of the Week. We know you guys like Dog of the Week because you guys might agree with us. You guys might not. This week's Dog of the Week, we've got Ryan Williams. That's who we've got. And if you haven't heard his name, you haven't been watching college football because this guy is 17 years old, lighting up the field. I mean, this guy there's nothing he's not doing amazing. We talked about it earlier this week about how, hey, Ryan Williams, actually Bryant, speaking of Bryant, we're going to go ahead and talk about that. Brian's actually helping out the NFL guys with their podcast. He will be back with us. But going back to Bryant, he talked about it. Ryan Williams might be one of those guys that has to make an impact for Alabama to win that game. And what an impact he made. I mean, holy smokes. Most of us at even our age hope to be able to do something like that. But no, this guy's doing it at 17 years old. Colin, what do you think about Ryan Williams, and who else did we have in that battle?
Ryan Williams, such a spectacular performance, Dave. Like you and Brian talked about last week, this guy has to really not get it going because he's been going already, but keep it going in this game for Alabama to have a chance against Georgia. He had 6 catches for 177 yards and a touchdown. Dave, he was averaging 29.5 yards per catch. What a performance by him. And you kind of see Georgia work their way back into this football game. Georgia take the lead late. And then Jalen Milroe just kind of throw one up on a chuck it and pray to Ryan Williams, and he makes the catch, an acrobatic catch at that. And then he makes a couple guys miss to find his way to the end zone. This guy is an absolute freak. Love everything he's doing so far. But yes, Dave, we did have 2 other guys that are in our honorable mentions that we had to kind of debate who we were going to end up giving this to. And that's Ashton Jeanty and Jalen Milroe. Both those guys had great performances as well. We just kind of felt like giving the nod to Ryan Williams here with everything he's accomplishing, especially at his age. This is seriously really, really impressive. I can't express it enough. Dave, I love the Ryan Williams pick. Love the Dog of the Week.
Hey, absolutely. Me and Colin even joked about it. The guy can't even buy a scratch off. I mean, he can't even serve our country making killer plays, changing the game of college football as a whole. But yes, I'll be the first one. I told Colin, I said, you know what? I think Ashton Jeanty has really made a name for himself. And Colin's been high on Ashton Jeanty all season long. I not so much. But I don't know. At this point, I'm not going to say he won't win Heisman because he is making a good point. I still don't think there's a high possibility, but I think his possibility every week he's getting better and better. And if you're a Heisman guy, that's what you're supposed to be doing. So we're going to talk about Heisman later on in the week as well. So before we go any further, we're going to go ahead and hit our film session. We know you guys like to talk about film session because we talk about how the games went, what the stats were, who showed up, who didn't show up, whether it was through injury or just not playing well at all. So before we get to our big game, we always like to give you guys, 4 or 5 big games that where we really dive deep. We talk about it heavily and we go from there. But first, it was a great weekend. So there was a lot of good games, a lot of games that we want to talk about. So I'm just going to go through a couple games that I want Colin to kind of give us some information about here. First one's going to be Arizona, Utah. How did that game go? What happened there, Colin?
Yeah, you kind of heard it here last week. We talked about how Arizona really has a chance in this football game. I think I even leaned Arizona on our show. And Arizona did exactly that, man. They came out. They kind of took care of business. Obviously, Tetairoa McMillan was the go-to guy for Noah Fafita in this Arizona offense. That's nothing new. Everybody knows the ball's going to him, and it's still impossible to slow that guy down. But yeah, man, Utah, we talked about this before. Kyle Whittingham, Cam Rising. We just keep doing this over and over and over again. There was a chance he was going to play last week. Here we are this week. You kind of see that line start bouncing around and dropping real quick right before game time. kind of alluding to that he's probably not going to play, and Ken Rising didn't play. And hey, Arizona got this game, and I think it was for that reason. So, Dave, I'm glad Arizona won this football game. Hats off to them.
Hey, speaking of people not playing, the next one we're going to talk about is Oklahoma Auburn. I mean, Jackson Arnold not that starter anymore. What's going on? Wasn't he supposed to be their golden child? What's going on there, Colin? I mean, we have Michael Hawkins Jr. take over at the quarterback position. How did that work out for him?
I just remember texting you and Bryant right before the kick of this game. I saw that Jackson Arnold once again wasn't the starter, and I just said, hey, he's gone. He's transferring out. Most likely in today's age of football, Jackson Arnold not playing probably is going to lead to him transferring out. Obviously, we have no details or proof of that, but this is just all speculation by us. I lean that direction pretty heavy. But yeah, Michael Hawkins Jr., this is his team now, man. And he looked okay. He was missing the whole entire receiver room, it felt like. So what a performance by him to really grind this one out and get a win. This whole game changed when Peyton Thorne threw a pick six late in the fourth quarter. Auburn had an 11-point lead in the fourth quarter, and Oklahoma somehow finds their way to a win here. Really, really, what a letdown by Hugh Freeze and this team to kind of give this one away, it felt like, Dave. I'm not impressed with either team's offense. They both look awful on that side of the ball. I'm going to tip my cap again to this Oklahoma defense. They do look like a unit to be reckoned with, man.
Absolutely. This was one of those, a lot of times where Oklahoma defense is good. In the past, they've been their offense is always soaring through everything. Now their defense is really good. Their offense is struggling. That could be a result of coaching changes. That could be a result of players, who you have available. They did have a lot of injuries out. And we didn't even
Brent Venables took over as head coach for Oklahoma, and he's a defensive-minded coach. The defense is going to come first for those defensive coordinators that take over as head coach. Obviously, Lincoln Riley was an offensive guy, moves on. So you kind of, to your point there, you do have that coaching mix-up. That's probably why the culture's kind of changed on what shines at Oklahoma.
Hey, absolutely. And I think going back into that, it's hard to have that transition from a coach that thinks more offensively to a coach that thinks more defensively, because now you got players that have certain play styles, certain ways they like to do things. And maybe Jackson Arnold doesn't fit for Brent Venables, but maybe he did fit for Lincoln Riley. Who knows? Well, it's one of those things we may not find out unless he transfers to USC. Another game that I want to talk about that was huge as well is the Arkansas A&M game. That one was, that was just, the way I would describe it would be like a blue collar fist fight. That's what that was. That was just, they got gritty, they got into the trenches, and it was a rough game, but it was a fun game to watch though.
Yeah, Dave, like you said, man, that was a perfect analogy. This was just a blue-collar, hard-fought football game. This was a battle in the trenches. This was just a grinded-out football game. Both teams dragging each other in the mud. One looks like it's going to get out on top, and the other one kind of rolls over and gets on top of them. But what really prevailed here at the end is A&M just leaned on them all game long, and it really ended up taking over to the football game. Le'Veon Moss looked really good for this Texas A&M rushing attack. He was averaging 9 yards a carry. This game wasn't Jerry's world, so I'm sure he was a little upset seeing Arkansas go down on this one. But what a performance by Texas A&M to grind this out and get a W. They are staring down the barrel of bringing in a Mizzou team next week who's hungry and ready to get a win. So we're really looking forward to that one as well, Dave.
Absolutely. A&M better have it ready to go because they're playing Mizzou this weekend. So that's going to be a big game, exciting game. Me and Colin will most likely be together for that. Watching that game, it's gonna be exciting. But another game I want to talk about that is going to be that was very exciting, and personally, I thought Louisville was going to win the game, was the Louisville Notre Dame game. Lincoln. I almost said Lincoln Riley. Riley Leonard. He had a pretty good performance considering the way he's been playing in recently. 17 for 23, 163 yards, 2 touchdowns, not an interception. So I think this Notre Dame team is going to rely on Riley Leonard to perform well and efficient in order for them to win games. And it's only going to get harder as we move into the season. The first half, usually your easier half, and then you get into the thick of it. So, we'll kind of see how that goes. But Colin, what did you think? What did you see about the Louisville Notre Dame game? What do you think made a difference?
Yeah, I think what definitely made a difference in this game, Dave, is Louisville turned the ball over 3 times. That's something they hadn't done all year. They were clean in the turnover margin. That's why they were winning all these football games. And in order to beat a Notre Dame team you have to stay clean in the turnover margin because that defense is super tough, man. One of the best defenses in the country. You talked about Riley Leonard. Yeah, he had 2 passing touchdowns. That was a surprise for me as well. So Riley Leonard's passing touchdowns and Louisville's turnovers, it was the difference in this football game, Dave, and that's why you saw Notre Dame come out on top.
Another game that was pretty controversial was Oklahoma State, Kansas State. I would almost consider it a blowout. 20-42, Kansas State gets the win. I just wasn't impressed by either one of these two teams. I mean, I know Kansas State, was going into this 3-1. Oklahoma State, it's already not looking real great for them. They can't get Ollie Gordon to really get the ball going. And yes, he did pick up 76 yards on 15 carries, still only averaging about 5 yards. They need more from him. He's not a mid-level player. He's a great player, and he needs to show that. I mean, if you're relying on your quarterback, Alan Bowman went 26 for 50. I'm no mathematician, but that's less than 50. That's about 51% at best. 364 yards, yes, but on 50 attempts. I mean, this wasn't practice, was it? I mean, what is going on? I mean, and even then Johnson on the other end, also 19 for 31, 259 yards, 3 touchdowns. I personally didn't watch a lot of this game call. Talk to us. What did this game really look like? Was it as bad as the numbers look?
Yeah, that's tough to say, Dave. I don't want to say it's as bad as the numbers looked, but what's crazy to me is Ollie Gordon kind of got it going early in this football game, it seemed like. It looked like that offensive line was finally generating a push. He had a big catch out of the backfield for a big gain. Things were looking like Ollie Gordon might get it going in this football game. Then it just kind of collapsed. The offensive line fell apart. They were no longer getting a push. Kansas State was controlling the lines of scrimmage. Kansas State had a great offensive performance in this one because Avery Johnson sat back in the pocket and showed everybody that, hey, I don't have to run to win us football games. I can air this thing out too. Really, what a great response by him after the BYU performance the week before. Avery Johnson having 259 yards and 3 passing touchdowns. I was really impressed by him. And, man, this Kansas State rushing attack is lethal. It's lethal without Avery Johnson. You had DJ Giddens rushing for 187 yards and a touchdown. And Avery Johnson had 2 rushing touchdowns himself with 60 yards. This rushing attack is lethal, man. Kansas State is lethal on the offensive side of the ball. I want to see that defensive hold up, and I really want to see Kansas State's passing attack continue on the trend that they were on in this football game. We talked about Jace Brown here last week on this show, and he kind of had an explosive performance in this one with 78 yards and a touchdown. So good for Kansas State, man. They look like they got things going in the right direction now with the bounce-back performance against Oklahoma State. Really excited to see where they head, Dave.
Man, on Friday, Virginia Tech played Miami. I mean, that game, I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there. Miami should have 1 loss on their record. That last call, there's no way you reverse that call because it was not clear and obvious. This is what I understand to be the ruling is clear and obvious.
Yeah, that's a great way to put this, Dave. I've had many conversations about this play. I've watched it a couple of times, and I'm just glad that we didn't have to make that call because that was one of those plays where it truly could have went any direction. And I understand why a lot of people think that they overruled this for Miami, for the headlines to keep a team undefeated, all that jazz. You do kind of have that speculation in the back of your mind a little bit. But you are right, man. It was not clear and definitive to overturn this, and the call on the field was a touchdown. So at that point, I'm with you, Dave. I really thought Virginia Tech was going to uphold this win, and it was going to be really hard to overturn. But, man, they did. But one thing in this game that was wild to me, too, is Cam Ward was pressured all football game. Virginia Tech came to play in this one. They wanted to make a stance. This was the Virginia Tech team that we had talked about kind of before the season started about how they have all these returning starters. They should really be firing on all cylinders. It looks like they finally put it all together in that football game, and that was good for Virginia Tech, man. I'm glad to see that they performed well, but Miami did just edge this one out. Xavier Restrepo with an unreal catch to extend the drive late in that game. I don't know if you guys saw that, but Xavier Restrepo goes out for a route, and I believe it was 4th down, and he slips in the turf or the grass and falls down on his route, and Cam Ward puts it on him, and Xavier Restrepo throws their hands up and makes a play to extend the drive. Also, Cam Ward, it wasn't his best statistical game we've seen all season, but one play that really stood out to me is Cam Ward snapped the football. The defensive line blows it up. This is late in the football game. The defensive line blows it up, and they hit him, and he breaks the sack, stands up, finds a man, makes a play, extends the drive as well. this is like Heisman plays that we talk about. Not always is it in the stat column. This was a Heisman play, and man, that was really incredible by him to kind of throw the team on his shoulders and go win a football game. He never looked to me like he got flustered. He never looked to me like he was going to fall apart and everything was going to crumble around him. Looked to be a great leader. Was really, really impressed with Cam Ward's performance in this one. And also, I want to shout out Damian Martinez. That guy is a load out of the backfield for this Miami football team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to hit on Cam Ward because I was texting you throughout this game and talking to you about this game. I mean, first half Cam Ward, I was like, man, I don't know. He may be falling out of my Heisman race. But then, he started picking it up. And for me, as a former athlete, this is what I look at for players because there's a lot of players that are good. But the second things get tough, second things get hard, they start to cave. They start to fall apart. And we've seen that already in college football this year. But I was very impressed. Colin, you hit the nail on the head with it was almost frustrating how calm and relaxed Cam Ward was in these intense situations or, where he had an interception. He didn't seem fazed at all. He was just out there. He's having fun. He's playing the game. And he just seems so calm. I mean, he's making ridiculous plays, walks away like he does this every day. I mean, probably does. But I think this is what separates a Heisman-level player versus not a Heisman-level player because he didn't have a good first half, but then he still ended up, you look at his first half versus second half, completely different ball games. He was able to turn it up. He was able to turn it around. And, like you said, Virginia Tech played a heck of a game, and he still ended up managing to help them win this game.
Well, man, Miami's turnovers also was kind of what kept Virginia Tech around in this one. That was huge for Virginia Tech to generate those turnovers. And also, that Virginia Tech fake field goal, that was a total momentum killer. I still can't believe that was a call they made in this one. I just don't understand what that call was for. I don't agree with that one. This game probably could have ended differently. I mean, you can say it could have ended differently regardless either way. But, I mean, that really changed things in my opinion, Dave. So Miami's defense needs to play better down the stretch because Virginia Tech was lighting them up. And they cannot let a Virginia Tech team light them up and expect to have success down the stretch.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm with you 100%. I think that Virginia Tech they have a caliber to be a good team. They just haven't been able to put the pieces together. But a team that I want to talk about, and this is our next game that we're going to talk about, Kentucky at Ole Miss. Probably one of the biggest upsets possibly for the year, truthfully. And I've been kind of feeling out Kentucky. I can't tell if they're good. I mean, let's look at their last two games. They put a heck of a showing up against Georgia, almost knocked Georgia off. That Georgia Kentucky game could have gone just the same that this Miami Virginia Tech game went. So it could have ended either way. So they scrap it out with Georgia. Now they come into Ole Miss and they beat them 20-17. I'm trying to figure out, is Kentucky better than I think they are? I'm not even going to talk about the quarterback position. Vandegrift, not that great. But, I mean, they knocked out an Ole Miss team that I believe prior to this, AP had them at number 6. So I'm just trying to figure out what went wrong here. I mean, or is Kentucky really on the come up? Are they on the rise?
I think Kentucky is a quarterback away from being exceptionally well. Brock Vandegrift has not been great, and I think that does kind of hold them back a little bit. But, Dave, you saw Kentucky come in here on Ole Miss's homecoming and punch them right in the mouth. But what's crazy is Ole Miss came out gunning right away in the first quarter, and things just kind of fell apart for them from there. They never could get anything generating after that. The only thing working for them was the Jackson Dart Trey Harris hookup. And, I mean, we see that every single week. They've got to get something else going on because Kentucky bottled up that Ole Miss run game, and that was not what I was expecting in this one. We had Ole Miss first half minus 10.5, and, man, Ole Miss just did not impress. I think it was one of those games, it was early in the day. They were kind of dragging. I think they were overlooking Kentucky a little bit. But, yeah, Dave, this Kentucky team is better than what we thought. I do want to give them credit on that. I mean, credit where credit is due to Mark Stoops and this Kentucky football team. Good for them. They may find their way in some conversations to get ranked down the stretch. I really do think they can be a tough opponent for some of these teams and give a lot of teams fits. But what's crazy to me too, David, is Ole Miss converted only 1 third down in this football game. That is not a recipe for success at all. They had more fourth down completions and more fourth down conversions than they did third down because they had 2 fourth downs and only 1 third down. That is not good at all. But this was kind of a clean game. It was an ugly football game, but it was clean. Only 1 total turnover in the football game. but you saw quarterbacks getting lit up. There was 9 total sacks in this one. The defenses came to play, and it did look like all Kentucky had on offense was Dane Key. So, I mean, I still am just so surprised Kentucky edged this one out. I really thought down the stretch, I just kept telling myself, Ole Miss at some point will out-talent them and get the damn thing done, and they just never did it. So I'm really curious to see how Ole Miss responds to this one. Do the wheels kind of fall off, or does Lane Kiffin kind of use it as motivation for the rest of the way for Ole Miss? I mean, they can still find their way to the playoffs, don't get me wrong. But, man, they just made things interesting and hard on themselves. That's for damn sure.
So, one of the great things about doing this podcast and having multiple people on this podcast is sometimes it might open your mind to a thought process you weren't thinking, or maybe your aspect on a player. For example, me, Ashton Jeanty. I personally was not the biggest fan of Ashton Jeanty at the beginning. I thought he was overhyped. My mind got changed. Colin, you played a part of that. But as I was hearing you talk about this Kentucky Ole Miss game, I had kind of done my research, but as I'm hearing you, I hear, okay, Ole Miss seemed very one-dimensional. It was basically Dart to Harris. We have that. Kentucky was able to bottle up that run game. So it makes it sound to me like Ole Miss is in for some trouble, because if Kentucky was able to stop their run game, let's look at all the games they got coming up. There's some good defense that they're playing. So if they can stop the run game, and if all they got to worry about is Dart to Harris, they're starting to look like an Arizona team with McMillan and Fafita. It's starting to sound like the exact same situation that's going on there. So,
I do want to say, though, Ole Miss has a killer defense, though. Ole Miss's defense can keep them in just about any single football game. And you saw that here. The offense wasn't playing well, and the defense kind of kept them in it. I just think what we also saw is if Ole Miss can't use the tempo and keep the tempo going a full football game, or a team kind of knocks them back a little bit and then slows them down, that is where Ole Miss doesn't shine. And they have to learn that when the going gets tough, to slow down, settle down, and just go get points. And that's what they need to do in this one, and they never really did that.
Yeah, we'll see how they do. Like I said, their schedule coming up is going to be rough. But another game I really wanted to talk we really wanted to talk about was the Penn State game. Penn State ended up knocking off Illinois 21-7. It was at Penn State, so I think that's a huge, that plays a huge factor. I still think that Illinois is a good team even after this loss. I mean, you lose to Penn State. I mean, not even throwing around the fact that their kicker cannot hit anything. And that's, I can go on a rant about that, because when you have one motion to perform for 4 years, at this point, you've probably been doing it for 8, if you did high school, you've got to be able to hit the uprights.
Now, dude, neither team could kick a field goal and make it in this one, Dave. This was awful.
And that's why I'm fired up about it, because how do you have two teams that cannot make a field goal unless there's, crazy weather or, something? I just feel like you have to make those. And, there was that. And then there's so many penalties called. The ref, what's going on with, I mean, listen, I'm all for refs, call everything, keep it clean, keep this game right. But at some point, I'm like, all right, you're just overusing the whistle.
Oh, this was an ugly football game to watch. This was kind of a letdown for me on a football game to watch. I was really excited for. You see Luke Altmaier get sacked 7 times. He's constantly on the run. They had under 220 yards of total offense. Jalen Reed and Abdul Carter were all over the place for Penn State, notching 2 sacks for Abdul Carter and notching 1 sack for Jalen Reed. This Penn State defense was buzzing, Dave. But, yeah, we saw missed kicks, officials taking the games over, turnovers, sacks. This game had it all, and it was not entertaining at all. The only thing that was entertaining to me was Penn State's run game. Nick Singleton had 94 yards and a touchdown. Katron Allen had 102 yards and a touchdown. That was really the only entertaining part of this football game that I got to enjoy. Drew Aller, they didn't really use him that much. He didn't look all that impressive. Only had 21 total passing attempts, 15 completions, 135 passing yards. Nothing impressive at all, man. What's crazy to me, too, though, Dave, is Illinois marched right down the field the first drive of the game. Straight down the field on Penn State, punched it in the end zone, and I was like, holy shit, maybe this Illinois team might have really came here to play. They may really give Penn State a hell of a football game. And Penn State never had anything going after that. This became a snooze fest. Penn State did not impress me. Illinois did not impress me. Penn State just had that mindset of, hey, we're better than you. We have more talent than you. We're just going to lean on you all football game, wear you out, and we're going to prevail in the end. And that's really all I saw in this football game, Dave. Nothing too crazy, nothing too shocking.
Absolutely, and you hinted at, they didn't really use Drew Aller very much. I mean, I think this just goes to show good coaching. If you don't need to use them and your running game is crushing it, keep doing it. If it's working, keep doing it. Keep doing it. And I think that sometimes where coaches try to get too creative and they force the pass. If your run game is solid, get you a couple runs in, maybe get you a short slant. I don't know. Quick, easy passes. Don't force it. Don't overdo it.
Well, yeah, what you're kind of talking about is true. A lot of these young quarterbacks need to learn that just take what the defense gives you, man. If the defense is going to give you 5 yards on the pass play, just take the 5 yards. Hey, look, especially on first down, now it's 2nd and 5. Or if it's 2nd down and it's 2nd and 8, hey, the defense gives you 5 yards. Now it's 3rd and 3. Now it's 3rd and short. Now you have a higher percentage chance of converting on that 3rd down. So absolutely, some of these younger quarterbacks, hell, even some of these more veteran, mature quarterbacks that have been around a little bit, just take what the defense gives you, man. Just make it easy. Don't overdo it. Keep it simple, and just do what you've done your whole life and trust your abilities and go get first downs.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm pumped. I'm excited to talk about this next game. I mean, I find it hard for there to be another game that's going to be the game of the year outside of this game. I mean, when we're watching the game, and me and Colin, Brian, all keeping communication during games, and at one point Alabama was up 21-0, and I was like, "Holy smokes!" Like, no way Alabama's about to just blow out Georgia. I mean, I don't know how long it's been since Georgia was down 3 scores. That's when I was like, okay, Jalen Milroe came to play, and we talked about it last week again. Throwing in the Heisman conversation, I'm gonna go ahead and give a spoiler. Jalen Milroe is up there for me. I mean, it's hard not to. I didn't even have him in my top 3 last week, but after that performance against a Georgia team like that, but let's leave it aside even just the players. I mean, we've got to see 75 points in an Alabama-Georgia game. That is just insane. And
hey, we told y'all bet your mortgage on the over 48.5. We told y'all bet the mortgage. That was as free as it gets. So I'm glad you're talking about those points, because we had no sweat in that one, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, the big thing here was just Georgia not being able to run the ball, because now you depend on Carson Beck. And Carson Beck, I don't think is that good. I know a lot of people want him in the Heisman race. I don't think he's even close. I think there's 10 people ahead of him for sure.
I think first half Carson Beck and second half Carson Beck were a massive difference. He looks like he came out a little nervous almost. Like the crowd had got to him. Next thing you know, you're not converting on 3rd down. You have some turnovers. Alabama's flying right down the field and hanging points on you. You're trying to battle back. It still ain't working. They're scoring some more. It still ain't working for you, and they're scoring some more. So I think what we saw there was Carson Beck just got really flustered for a little bit. They went into halftime, kind of settled him down. And when he came out in the second half, he was a different quarterback. And it was one of those moments where early, not necessarily early, but Georgia got a possession where it was like 12, 13, 14 plays or something like that, and they just were going slow. And it showed that they have tons of confidence that their defense was going to step up and get stops, and they were going to find their way back in this football game. And that's exactly what they did, Dave. They found their way back in this football game. They take the lead late. Next thing you know, Alabama's like, holy shit, they're on their heels. They got too complacent. They had no momentum. I was sitting here thinking, does Alabama get back up and come back out here and score again? Well, hell, that didn't take long. Jalen Milroe just found Ryan Williams down the field somewhere, chucked it up to him, made a play, makes some guys miss, finds his way into the end zone. Alabama goes on and wins the football game. You're exactly right. This was probably game of the year, probably will hold up to be game of the year the rest of the way. This was an awesome, awesome football game. You love it when 2 high-powered programs like this come together, and it makes it all the worth. This was awesome. But, hey, let's talk about Alabama, because they are the ones that won the football game. Early on, you see Kalen DeBoer come running out of the tunnel in front of all these fans, and he looked like he was just taking the moment in. That was really cool to watch Kalen DeBoer just – it looks like he had never been in an environment like that before. To be honest, he probably never had. I mean, you hear the chants of Alabama going back and forth across the field, and he was just in awe. But what's crazy about Kalen DeBoer, too, is he gets fired up when he needs to. They have a big lead probably midway through this game, and there was a questionable passing interference call that wasn't made, and you see Kalen DeBoer losing his shit on the sidelines. So I also love seeing Kalen DeBoer get fired up too. But Jade, you talked about Jalen Milroe, and he's exactly who we need to talk about. He looked absolutely incredible in this football game. 117 on the ground, 2 total touchdowns on the ground. Hey, we told y'all, look at Jalen Milroe's rushing prop bet over 40-something yards. Man, he absolutely blew that out in the first quarter. So Jalen Milroe was absolutely electric in this football game. He was the difference. Also had 374 yards through the air and 2 touchdowns through the air. What a performance by Jalen Milroe. We cannot say enough about that. But I also want to talk about Kirby Smart and the second half adjustments he made, because they were a totally different football game in the second half. And you got to tip the cap to him for being able to rally the troops and build them up enough to come back out there and not lay down on him. He probably went in there and said, hey, look, we're the Georgia Bulldogs. We're not out of any football game. We just made it really tough. Now let's go get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was good that you highlighted Kirby Smart and how great those changes that he made were, and it was a different ball game. Because, I mean, I feel like a lot of times if you go down 3 scores, everything just goes downhill at that point. I mean, I don't think anybody, once Alabama was up 21-0, I don't think anybody saw Georgia getting back into this game. I mean, I didn't for sure.
I didn't see Georgia coming back and taking the lead ever like they did, but I did see a situation where Georgia got back in the football game, because as you kind of saw it, Alabama got pretty complacent and got pretty satisfied with the lead that they had. And next thing you know, good football teams find their way back. So that was almost a learning experience for Kalen DeBoer of what not to do. I mean, it still was a learning experience, but he got away with the dub when it looked like maybe for a second he might let one slip away. And could you imagine the conversation we'd be having right now if Kalen DeBoer let this one get away, and how pissed off the Alabama fans would be? My goodness, this can be a different conversation that we're having. But you did talk about Georgia not having a run game, and we talked about on this network how Georgia's pass game doesn't look to have real receiver threats. I want to tip the cap to Arian Smith and Don Lovett. They showed up and showed out and had 2 good performances, and they were both triple digits in the receiving category.
Yeah, but before we leave this game, I just want to go back and let's talk about the game-winning touchdown. Let's talk about that, because especially for people, if you've never played sports, you might not understand how hard what he did was, because the guy goes up, catches the ball. As he catches the ball, he spins inbound. I mean, just having the body awareness. I mean, that just shows maturity. That because most people are going to catch that ball, they're going to walk, we're going to run it out. Catch the ball, spins on it, and then he makes 2 guys miss. And these are very athletic plays. And you're not talking about, a guy from a G5 school. You're talking about top of the top, cream of the crop, Georgia defenders. Makes a miss, outruns them. I mean, just the body awareness is insane. I mean, yes, it was the game-winning touchdown, but let's just talk about Ryan Williams. I mean, the guy is, he may be the best player in the country at the moment. Like, I really think he's making a case for it.
It's tough. It's really tough. I mean, he's definitely up there in the conversation of being one of the best receivers in the country, because he's doing things that, veteran receivers aren't doing. But while we're talking about a freshman receiver that's doing crazy performances, we also got to talk about Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State. My God, talk about another freshman receiver lighting it up. I don't know if you guys out there saw this, but Jeremiah Smith makes back-to-back one-handed grabs on a drive for Ohio State, and one of them being in the end zone. He looks like a man amongst boys, and really he's the youngest one out on the field, unless Ryan Williams was out there with him, but he's not. But Jeremiah Smith's the youngest guy out there on the field, and making these guys look like they're still in high school. So, yeah, Dave, we have some loaded receiver talent coming up, and that makes this football so much fun to talk about those guys, because they are super electric and really entertaining to watch.
Absolutely. But again, there's tons of quality players, a lot of quality teams this year, and it's just going to be an amazing playoff. I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be electric, and there's going to be some upsets in that playoff. But that's all the games we had for you guys today. We always try to highlight a couple big games, dog of the week. We'll throw in a couple extra games just to talk about them, because we know some of you guys are into them. But again, thanks for hanging in with us. Next episode, next week, we will have Brian back with us. But like I said, like, comment, share, whether it's good feedback, bad feedback, give us all the feedback. We want to get better. We want to keep improving. And yes, we're going to keep changing things up as we move along because we want to keep growing. We want to keep doing better. But again, if you haven't already, check out our Deep Threat Sports Network on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere there's social media, we're there. And check out our other podcasts as well. Our MLB podcast, our NASCAR podcast. We're going to keep growing, and we want to keep providing you guys quality content. So keep supporting us. Keep staying with us, really. And we appreciate all you guys. So I'm going to just shoot it over to Colin and have him, kind of finish this off for us, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, guys, we appreciate all the support. Keep tuning in. Like Dave said, we just launched our Major League Baseball playoff podcast. It just took off on Sunday. Great things coming from those guys over there. You will see me on that show, a familiar face. Also, don't forget we have our Splash and Go guys with the NASCAR podcast. We have the NFL podcast. We have more and more coming to you down the stretch. Really look forward to doing all this stuff with all our fans out there. Like Dave said, be on the lookout later in the week. We'll have our Heisman and Top 25 episode coming out. We'll have our big game previews coming out. Bryant will be back with us. Really exciting stuff. Follow us on X at DT_sports_, YouTube Deep Threat Sports, Facebook Deep Threat Sports Network, Instagram Deep Threat Sports with a Z, TikTok Deep Threat Sports Network. Thank you guys for tuning in with us. Hey, Dave, until next time, peace.